Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of the Illegitimate Court Counteraction Act, a bill that I am proud to have worked on with my colleague and my friend, Representative Chip Roy, a bill that sanctions international criminal court officials and their families and anybody who is assisting them. Why? Because they are targeting America's allies who are right now the front line of fighting to bring American hostages home from Gaza. America is passing this law because on November 21, 2024, the International Criminal Court's pretrial chamber issued warrants for the arrest of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Israel's former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. Let me explain that in a more detailed way. America is passing this law because a kangaroo court is seeking to arrest the Prime Minister of our great ally, Israel, who is not only responding to an enemy which conducted a genocide, killing as many men, women, and children as possible, even beheading some of them on October 7, 2024, but an enemy who still holds 100 hostages, scores of bodies of those that they murdered, including 7 of my fellow Americans. Let me say that again. Israel is the tip of the spear in bringing the fight to an enemy who currently holds and has killed our fellow Americans. Israel has conducted this war with as much restraint as war can allow. In the face of horror, they have showed humanity. We know that for Israel, any civilian dying is a tragedy. And we know that for Hamas and the Palestinians who support them, civilians dying is quite literally their strategy for victory. Hamas' strategy uses hospitals and schools as bases for combat operations. Not some fighter accidentally walked into a hospital for 5 minutes carrying their machine gun. No. They build hospitals and schools into fortified launching points for attack. In clear violation of the laws of armed conflict, Hamas deliberately targets civilians. What the ICC is doing with their arrest warrants is legitimizing the false accusations of Israeli war crimes in order to do something. In order to stop the overwhelming success of Israeli military operations. Now, Mr. Speaker, I don't care if a person is a terrorist in a cave or if they are a lawyer in The Hague. If they are getting in the way of bringing home our Americans or bringing home our allies who are, as we speak, in this very moment, bound, blindfolded, tortured, raped, enslaved, starved, facing execution. If you are getting in the way of bringing them home, then we will give you no quarter, and we will certainly not allow you to be welcome to American soil.
I thank my friend from Florida, the chairman. I thank him for his support on this legislation. I thank him for his statesmanship on this particular issue, which is critically important for not just our friendship with our ally Israel, but also our own national security, the protection of our own men and women in uniform. Let's be clear about what is happening at the so-called International Criminal Court right now. It has taken unprecedented action of issuing arrest warrants for the sitting Prime Minister and former Minister of Defense of our friend and ally Israel. I mean, Let that sit in for a minute. This is an entity, the International Criminal Court, that has no jurisdiction over the people of the United States, should have no authority over our people, no authority over the Prime Minister of Israel. Yet it is extending into the people of Israel's business and defending their interest against violent attack by Hamas, which we define as a terrorist entity, which, as the chairman just pointed out, has killed American citizens and holds American citizens hostage as we sit here today. And somehow it is not a priority for the people of our country that we represent for us to be here on the floor of the House defending our men and women in uniform, defending our citizens, defending our ally Israel and the Prime Minister of Israel from a politicized witch hunt by the International Criminal Court, which again should have and doesn't have any jurisdiction over our people or the people of Israel. I would remind the gentleman from Massachusetts that 42 Democrats voted for this legislation last year. If this is such a crazy piece of legislation, perhaps the gentleman would like to have an inward-facing conference on his side of the aisle. It is very clearly a bipartisan interest to protect our people and the people of our friends in Israel. I would note that our problems aren't just the dangerous terrorist organizations like Hamas, but these international organizations given power over our citizens and our way of life. Not just the International Criminal Court, but, for example, UNRWA and other international organizations, without which Hamas wouldn't have many of the resources it needs to conduct these violent attacks on Israel and our own people. When the gentleman from Massachusetts talks about the plight of the people in Gaza, we should be reminded of the massive piles of pallets of food and relief that are stacked up because the United Nations is too incompetent to move those pallets, and remind our friends of the extent to which Hamas has been taking those resources and not distributing them to the people in Gaza. The fact of the matter here, this legislation is inherently America first. We have had situations where we've had American soldiers and our people targeted by the ICC. It will happen again if the House of Representatives and the Senate and the President don't take action to sanction the ICC to prevent this from happening again in the future.
And thank the gentleman for yielding, and thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's very clear that the gentleman from Massachusetts is well out of his depth when it comes to military warfare and how to conduct an operation. I'll let that speak for itself. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in strong support of this legislation. In November of 24, the International Criminal Court issued arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant on baseless and reprehensible charges of war crimes and crimes against humanity. These charges are not only morally indefensible, but a blatant bias of justice. Israel does not deliberately target civilians as terrorists harbor them in mosques, churches, and schools, and hospitals, and so many more. The Israeli government has taken unprecedented steps to minimize civilian harm during conflicts, a commitment that's unparalleled by any other nation facing terrorists. The accusation that Israel uses starvation as a weapon of war is a blatant lie, ignoring the immense humanitarian aid Israel has proven and provided to Gaza despite ongoing attacks. This illegitimate attack on Israel emboldens terrorist organizations like Hamas. Both President Biden and President Trump have rightly condemned these charges, recognizing their destructive implications. This critical legislation, which has previously passed this body with strong bipartisan support, sends a clear and unequivocal message the United States will not tolerate the ICC's abuse of power against our allies or our citizens. Once again, the ICC has no jurisdiction over the United States of America or the people of Israel. They need to call this what it is: anti-Semitism. That's what this is. That's what the ICC is going after, and that's what you're condoning from the gentleman of Massachusetts, and I see the support on the other side of the aisle with all your colleagues sitting next to you fighting right alongside. I yield back.